therapy or any type of radiation. I was extremely lucky. I found Dr. Burzynski. And I don't want the FDA to take this right from me. I came 18 years ago from communist Romania, and the tyrannous dictator Ceausescu never stopped a doctor from treating anybody. How can we have something like this in the United States?
Barely a week after these hearings, on November 20th, 1995, Dr. Stanislaw Burzynski was indicted. Burzynski was charged with 75 counts of violating federal law and fraud. If convicted, Burzynski would face a maximum of 290 years in a federal prison and $18.5 million in fines. Not to mention what would happen to his patients.
He is their last chance for life, but now the federal government is issuing a death sentence for the patients of this cancer doctor.
On February 9th, Houston federal court judge Sim Lake ruled Dr. Burzynski's treatments have been, quote, illegal under Texas and federal law since 1984, and he ordered them stopped on all but a handful of patients. Then he put a stay on his own order, a stay of execution.
I believe that most of these 300 people will die within a short period of time if the treatment is stopped.
In 1996, not only did scores of Dr. Burzynski's patients return to Washington, D.C. to protest his indictment, but many of them testified again before another congressional hearing headed by Congressman Joe Barton.
Our first witness is Marianne Canary, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
From Aurora, Minnesota.
This is Dustin Canary, and he is on Dr. Burzynski's anti-neoplastin treatment. This is my husband, Jack Canary. Now, in February of 1994, our lives were drastically changed. My son, Dustin, was only 2.5 years old at the time. He was diagnosed with a brain tumor the size of a golf ball. The surgeon removed 75% of his tumor, and the remaining 25% was diagnosed from a biopsy as a malignant, very aggressive medulloblastoma brain tumor, one of the most deadly forms of brain cancer. The doctors told us Dustin had only a few months to live. The first treatment offered us was radiation, but the radiation doctor told us that at his young age, Dustin would become a vegetable, and it would only extend his life for maybe a few months. The next doctor wanted us to enroll Dustin in a experimental chemotherapy, which was highly toxic. The side effects would include hearing loss, kidney and liver damage, bladder, stunted growth, and a possible leukemia. One question I would like to ask is, would you do that to your child? We weighed the harm these experimental drugs would cause against the fact that they would not cure Dustin, and decided not to subject him to these drastic measures. But our oncologists told us that their opinion took precedence over us as parents. This put added stress to the already stressful situation we were in. In April of 1994, we visited Dr. Stanislaw Burzynski in Houston. Dr. Burzynski made us no promises, but said that he often had very good results with brain tumors. At worst, it would not hurt Dustin, and it offered the best hope and a longer quality of life. An MRI 6 weeks after we started Dr. Burzynski's treatment revealed no tumor. We were very overjoyed. Dustin continued anti-neoplastin therapy, and 1 year later, A tumor 1 inch by 1 inch in size was found on the MRI. That would be April of 1995. Dr. Brzezinski immediately raised Dustin's dose of antineoplastons. There were still no harsh side effects at all. The next MRI in September of 1995 revealed that the tumor had almost disappeared again. To this day, it has not reappeared. If you look at Dustin right now, he is a happy, healthy 4-year-old who has outlived his prognosis. There is no traditional treatment that would have kept him alive with such good quality of life. FDA Commissioner David Kessler loves to grab headlines as a man who loves children so much. He wants to protect them from the ravages of smoking. If Dr. Kessler loves children so much, why have he and his agencies been trying so hard to cut off my son's last hope for life? Without this treatment, my son will die.
This is a photo of Dustin Canary at 4 years old in 1996. This is a photo of Dustin Canary at 18 years old in 2009, and his brain cancer never returned.
In 1996, because of pressure from the politicians and American opinion, FDA agreed to accept all of the patients whom we have at the time to the program of phase 2 clinical trials. Basically, we filed and received permission to proceed from FDA for 72 different phase 2 clinical trials, which covered practically any type of cancer. This was such a tremendous work that basically it was necessary for me to work almost around the clock with 6 secretaries who were typing different protocols, and later I learned that FDA created a special task force to be able to review these protocols. You have sarcoma, soft tissue sarcoma, there's a special protocol for that. You have breast cancer, special protocol. For lung cancer, a few different protocols. For brain tumors, about over 20 different protocols for different types of brain tumors.
So, just a year before his trial facing life in prison, the Food and Drug Administration had finally authorized the very thing that Dr. Brzezinski and his patients had ever wanted. Even still, the FDA would not back down in making sure Brzezinski's trial moved forward. Federal prosecutors concede that a cancer doctor they will put on trial here in January for using an innovative but unapproved drug has been saving lives. The prosecution marks the first time the FDA has tried to jail a scientist for using a drug on which he is conducting FDA-authorized clinical trials. In a pretrial motion, Assistant U.S. Attorney Mike Clark objected to a defense request for the jury to visit the chemical plant where Dr. Brzezinski manufactures antineoplaston. The jury visit request is a thinly veiled effort to expose the jury to the specter of Dr. Brzezinski in his act of saving lives. Whether antineoplaston does or does not work is not an issue, and the jury should not be asked to decide the question. He added that if the issue comes up at trial, it would be an irrelevant, emotional, prejudicial, and misleading concern.
The issue of whether antineoplastons work may not even come up during the trial. The judge says that's not relevant, but the defense contends that's exactly the point, that what was done in developing the drug and administering it was done to save lives.
This trial cost the American taxpayer $60 million, while costing Dr. Brzezinski over $2.2 million. $700,000 of Brzezinski's legal defense was raised primarily by Dr. Julian Whitaker through his newsletter, Health and Healing. After Dr. Whitaker wrote of the plight and injustice being done to Dr. Burzynski, his readers sent in close to 18,000 checks and small donations for Burzynski's legal defense.
The trial is expected to last about 2 months. The jury will then decide whether Burzynski is a fraud or a medical pioneer.
On March 4th, 1997, due to a deadlocked jury, the judge declared a mistrial. And after saying the government had not presented sufficient evidence, he ordered that Dr. Burzynski be acquitted of nearly half of the 75 counts.
You voted to acquit?
To acquit, absolutely.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
I voted for acquittal.
I voted my mind and my heart.
I do not believe that Dr. Burzynski is a criminal.
And I had voted to acquit.
But the FDA was still not backing down. They took Dr. Burzynski to trial again. Though, after apparently accepting the absurdity of their case, on May 19th, the FDA suddenly dropped 40 of the 41 remaining charges. The FDA's facade in trying to convince the world that Burzynski was a criminal was completely unraveling. Even the jurors who voted not guilty in the first case took time off of work to join the patient's protest in front of the courthouse during the second case.
I am appalled at the Food and Drug Administration and their actions.
We're here today basically to protest the witch hunt that's going on by the FDA.
We have to stick together and really support these patients that are suffering, not only health-wise, but having to come down here to make a stand against the FDA.
Please don't waste my money abusing the system to make sure that you maintain your power.
The jury spent about 3 hours deliberating this house of cards, leaving Burzynski acquitted of the final charge.
Every one of Dr. Burzynski's patients now, every future Burzynski patient is and will be on a clinical trial.
There are many patients who would like to testify in our behalf and convince the jury and the judge that without the treatment they will die. But the judge did not admit any statements which could show that the treatment is effective. The judge did not allow the jury to visit our facility where we produce medicine. They were trying to keep it away from the jury. If this information will be presented to the jurors, then this trial would be finished very quickly. And that's what the jurors told us, because after the trial we talked to the jurors, and they were shocked that such information about the treatment, which is saving the life of a patient, was not presented to them. And I was sick listening to the lies of prosecutors from US attorneys. It was not necessary for them to do it. They could tell the truth. They represented the biggest power, but they still were doing this all the time. So they were trying to do it a sneaky way. And that's what is horrible, okay? That's what should be exposed, because I think the United States deserves better.
While all of this was taking place, Burzynski knew that the easiest way to keep the government from putting him out of business or in prison was to partner with an established pharmaceutical company. An interest was shown from Japanese pharmaceutical company Chugai and the Italian pharmaceutical company Sigma Tau, but both deals eventually evaporated, likely due to the rapport developed so far between antineoplastons and the FDA, being an issue indeed, and were unable to verify the likelihood that they could openly and effectively work with the FDA. Then, by 1990, it seemed that Burzynski's luck had finally changed. Burzynski had apparently treated the sister-in-law of the chairman and CEO of Elan Pharmaceuticals. Elan enthusiastically drafted a letter of intent stating they would aggressively pursue the filing of necessary protocols with the Food and Drug Administration for approval and marketing of antineoplastons as quickly as possible. They soon negotiated financing, licensing agreements, and royalties. In the midst of closing this deal with Elan, more good news emerged. Dr. Davorit Samid, A scientist and medical professor from Maryland, who Brzezinski had hired to further study anti-neoplastons, managed to present her work at an oncology symposium in Switzerland.